Well, thank you very much. And we have a nice intimate group. So Anna and Kelly, if there's at any moment, if you'd like to unmute and interrupt me and ask a question, no problem at all. Happy to do that. So I don't always say that. Sometimes we'll have like 1,000 people on and they all try to unmute, and that's disaster. So yeah, so today Cam and I talked about how do we really focus on meetings, which is a big part of what I've been talking about for a lot of years. And so I wrote a book about culture called The Power of Company Culture. And I really think that your meetings reflect your culture in either a very good way or in a very bad way, right? Depending upon what you're doing. And it was really fascinating as we went fully remote. How we met became one of the most important things that we had to figure out. It took us a few years to really get it all dialed in, to really get good at it. And so I'm going to give you all of our little secrets here in an hour or less, and you can take them back and have 2 years of wisdom of us experimenting and trying and reading 900 books and bringing in experts. And we finally figured out what were the real keys to us meeting effectively in a way that didn't drain us. It didn't make us feel disrupted. It didn't, cause more disagreements that were necessary. Really helped us empower the organization. So I always joke, not another effing meeting, but how can we create meetings that people will love instead? As Cam mentioned, my organization that I run, and so sort of my day job is running People G2, and I also am a fractional executive for a few organizations as well, coming in and helping them on a part-time basis with their people, their remote strategies, their hybrid strategies, and all that. But my organization went fully remote in 2001. And prior to that, no one had ever written anything nice about us, had written anything about us, period. And no one really knew who we were. And we went remote and started working on all this. And magically, we started becoming a best place to work, right? And then we started getting recognized all over the place. And then we started growing rapidly. So we were an Inc. 5000 fastest growing company 5 times. I attribute that to not only us going remote, but us focusing on our culture and focusing on how to meet properly. It radically changed our entire trajectory and how our organization could grow and empower people. And then we started getting, noticed all around the webs. So that's sort of my little story. And I mentioned that the first book, and in that book, we focus on the 7 pillars of what the best organizations do on a regular basis. You can see those 7 pillars there. And really, the meetings that I'm going to talk about today are a way in which we can reinforce these concepts, right? Great meetings can help us have better transparency in the organization. Great meetings can allow us to have positive leadership. Great meetings can help us understand where we're at, right? And bring in that measurement component and help us celebrate what makes us unique and allow us to celebrate and allow us to really listen to our people and also even admit mistakes and figure out how we can leverage that in a positive way. So all of these things are very well tied together. But before I go any further, I always like to start with somebody else's work. This is Daniel Pink's work. And I think this is like foundational. This is like if you, I think, what's that joke or that story, right? If you build a house on sand, right? I think if you're not building your house or your company on these concepts as a baseline, it is going to be very difficult to do anything else that matters. So we have to ensure that people have autonomy to their jobs. Autonomy is not complete freedom, but it is a lot of freedom inside of the area that you want them to work, right? Allow them to figure out how to get that done. What's fascinating about remote work is that it actually amplifies autonomy because people can kind of ebb and flow throughout the day. They could take 2 hours off and then come back and work, 2 more hours later on. Whereas in a traditional office, you sort of go in at a certain time and you leave at a certain time. So it's not really possible. We need to make sure that people have mastery. So they're always learning something new. That could be at work, that could be outside of work, but as long as they have some area in their life where they're learning new things, that is a part of them being able to be happy as an employee. And then last, but certainly not least, they are tied to our purpose. So they need to understand what our purpose is. Now, my company's purpose is to make the world a slightly safer place. We do background checks. Sex offenders apply for jobs that was in schools like all the time. People who've stolen money apply to be, to work in securities and exchanges or at banks. And you'd be shocked at these people who think after they got caught once, they wouldn't go back again, but they do over and over, right? So we know our work can help prevent that. And so that's part of our purpose. Now, whatever your purpose is for your organization, Do you know it? And can your people articulate it back to you, even in their own words? It doesn't have to be exactly how it's written on someone's wall, but can they articulate it in a good way? Those are very foundational things. So if you're not doing that, take a picture of that or let Cam know, and I'm happy to send you a copy of the deck, or you can contact with me on LinkedIn or whatever. Start here, and then we can move on to the next bit. So I would love to know for the few that are here, what are some of the things that you think make up a great meeting? So you could unmute, you could throw it in the chat. Would love to know if there are some key things that you've discovered that are a part of having a great meeting. Anna and Kelly and Susan, this is your time to chime in while I take a sip of green tea. Looks like we got one here. And Cam can too, there we go. Clear goals, I like that, Susan. Clear goals. So there's a lot of the standard things that we think about, and I think I'll hit some of those. But let's kind of dive in. So the first thing is, before we even decide we're going to meet, we needed to know, what does a good meeting look like? What does the anatomy of that team look like? And there's some wonderful research that comes from a combination of places. Google has done an incredible amount of research on this, and they actually put it up for free on a website of theirs. And also Scrum has done a great deal of this work to really talk about what makes a great team. And they together found a lot of the same things through all this research. And what they found was that great teams need to be self-forming. So if you are forcing people, remember the autonomy thing, if you're forcing people to be on all these meetings all the time, it is not self-forming. Now, if I apply for it to be on the sales team, if I'm going to be a salesperson, I have volunteered to go to the sales meetings by default, right? But what I mean is, if you're going to have another meeting about something else, we want to ask people, who wants to be on this meeting, right? Or, hey, can you join this meeting? If we make it a optional, suggested, hey, we'd like to have you on this if you feel like you can contribute, it really changes the energy. If people feel like they are coming because they want to, not because they have to, right? Just think about your 17-year-old self when your parents told you to go clean your room. Like, immediately you were not ever going to do it, and you were going to run away, right? You had immediate passive-aggressive energy against it. This is exactly how employees feel most of the day. So we want to change that energy for them. Second, it should be 5 to 7 people only. To me, 5 is gold. I can deal with 6, 7 is manageable. But if I'm at 4 or less, I feel like I don't have momentum. It's hard to get things done. And if I'm at 8 or more, it feels more like a webinar and less like a meeting. So it's 5 to 7. Jeff Bezos says, if 2 large pizzas won't feed your team, there's too many people there. So it's a really, really good number to keep in there. And then we want to establish some very unique norms. This is what Google discovered. They went back and said, geez, why do some teams do really, really well and some teams don't? Is it the manager? Is it like 2 extroverts and 3 introverts? Is it like a gender thing? They experimented with so many different things. And what they discovered really surprised them. And I am oversimplifying and making this a very complex bit of data into 3 points here. So if you are interested in this, you could certainly go find their work and really dive into it a bit more. But the 3 big things that I pulled from this were, they decided what success looked like before they started. So if you have a team that meets all the time, like let's say your sales team, they have a quota, they have a goal for the year, they know what success is. But if you're working on the holiday party, or you're working on, establishing a new CRM for your company, or a new phone system, or something else that maybe is a one-time event, what does success look like? Who has to agree to this? What is the budget? Who has to have buy-in? Does it need to integrate with something else? And what are all these things that would make it successful? About 80% of the time, maybe 70%, 75% of the time, people do this. But we find about a quarter of the time they don't. They don't even talk. They just assume everyone already knows what success is. And now we have people with competing goals inside of the same team. Number 2, and this is the one that almost nobody does, is talk about, what does failure look like? If our team failed, if this project failed, if this meeting failed. Now, I don't mean if you're just going to meet with someone for 10 minutes on the phone. I don't mean you're going to have to go through all this. I mean, if you're going to establish a group of people that are going to be meeting over a period of time, we need to talk about what failure looks like. We wouldn't get the CEO's buy-in. We would be over the budget. Maybe this program we picked didn't integrate with this other program we need to have. You have to be very clear, and everyone has to understand what would happen if we failed. Maybe we miss a deadline, whatever this is. We know we don't usually like to talk about tough stuff, but this actually hyper focuses the organization or that team to know where they need to go and how to avoid failure, because they know what failure will be. And then this is probably the one that was a big surprise to Google. Their best teams had a conflict strategy, meaning they had agreed as a group what would happen if something went wrong, right? If they had conflict inside of that team. So maybe if Cam and I were adamantly opposed to two separate ideas on how to go forward, right? How would we resolve that conflict? Well, we better decide that in advance. Is it going to be majority rule? We're all going to take a vote. Is it I'm going to take everyone's opinion? The team leader is going to make the final choice. Do we bring in an outside manager from another department in to help us with a tie break? Whatever that is, it doesn't matter. In fact, my teams have totally different strategies among them. It's what works best for them and their personality types, right? So you have to decide how you're going to deal with conflict. Otherwise, when conflict occurs, people stop showing up for the meetings, people get passive aggressive, and one or two people end up doing all the work. 2 or 3 people go around complaining that the other 2 people don't listen to them, right? And it's a terrible, terrible, thing. Anyone who's been like a college, a group project knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? It always descends into madness somehow. So that's because no one ever talks about how we're going to deal with conflict.